Here's a full creative 1,300-word article draft for your topic. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds has an end date, and that's a very good thing. When Star Trek: Strange New Worlds launched in 2022, it was billed as a kind of retro-modern experiment. The show set out to recapture the optimism and episodic adventure of the original 1960s series while benefiting from modern production values and serialized character arcs. It was an audacious move, and it worked. The first 2 seasons were praised for their balance of classic Trek sensibilities and contemporary storytelling. But as Paramount confirmed that Season 5 will be the show's last, some fans have reacted with dismay. After all, why stop when things are going so well? The answer is that a clear end date is not just a good idea for Strange New Worlds. It might be the best thing that could happen to it. Trek has always thrived when its creators understood the boundaries of their sandbox. Giving Captain Christopher Pike, Spock, and the Enterprise crew a definitive endpoint could preserve the show's quality, protect its legacy, and allow it to land its emotional arcs with far more impact than an open-ended run ever could. Below, we'll explore why Strange New Worlds' finite lifespan is actually an asset, not a liability, and how it connects to the larger history of Star Trek storytelling. 1. Star Trek has a history of overstaying its welcome. One of the major criticisms of Star Trek in the 1990s and early 2000s is that the franchise stretched itself thin. The Next Generation lasted a full 7 seasons, enough to let its characters blossom, but also long enough for some formulaic episodes to creep in. Deep Space Nine arguably hit its creative peak in seasons 4 through 6, then limped slightly into season 7. And Enterprise, a prequel like Strange New Worlds, started strong but collapsed under weak ratings by season 4, ending not with a triumphant finale but a meta-episode that left fans bitter. This track record demonstrates a simple truth. Trek shows have rarely known when to bow out. By the time they do, they're often running on fumes, and the finale feels like an obligation rather than an event. Giving Strange New Worlds an explicit end date avoids this fate. Instead of stumbling across the finish line, the show can sprint toward it. 2. Pike's story was always meant to be finite. Even before the series began, fans knew Strange New Worlds was telling a story with a built-in expiration date. In canon, Captain Pike's future is already written. In The Menagerie from the original series, we learn that Pike suffers a horrific accident that leaves him paralyzed and unable to command. Discovery's second season doubled down on this by showing Anson Mount's Pike directly confronting his fate via a time crystal. This means Strange New Worlds was never going to be a show about infinite adventures like The Next Generation or Voyager. It's a prequel to a tragedy, and its power lies in how it gets us to that inevitable moment. Ending at season 5 gives the writers enough runway to dramatize Pike's journey without dragging it out. Imagine the alternative. 5 or 6 more seasons of Pike stoically knowing his doom but never reaching it. The tension would become artificial. By committing to a clear end, the show can transform Pike's fate from a looming shadow into a moving culmination of his arc, making it not just tragic but heroic. 3. Spock, Uhura, and the crew need a seamless handoff. Another reason a firm endpoint matters is the transition to the original series. Strange New Worlds has been introducing younger versions of beloved characters: Spock, Uhura, Chapel, M'Benga, and even Kirk. These portrayals have been widely praised, but they also create a timeline bottleneck. At some point, these characters must either exit the Enterprise or evolve into their TOS selves. A well-timed conclusion gives the writers the chance to orchestrate these exits and transformations in an elegant way. Spock's growth from awkward, conflicted science officer to the cool, logical Vulcan we know from Leonard Nimoy can be charted deliberately rather than rushed. Chapel's unrequited feelings for Spock can be resolved with pathos rather than melodrama. Even the eventual arrival of Dr. M.C. Coyer Scotty can be set up naturally rather than crammed in for fan service. This kind of planning only works if you know where the finish line is. With Season 5 as the endpoint, Strange New Worlds can construct a finale that not only honors its own story, but also dovetails cleanly into the beginning of Kirk's 5-year mission. 4. Modern prestige TV is built for shorter runs. In today's television landscape, a 5-season arc isn't a failure, it's a sweet spot. Prestige dramas like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul have demonstrated that finite runs produce tighter storytelling and more memorable finales. Even genre shows like The Expanse or The Mandalorian, if it ends soon, benefit from knowing their narrative shape in advance. By contrast, endless renewals often dilute a series. Consider how The Walking Dead became a shell of itself by the time it reached double-digit seasons, or how Game of Thrones floundered once it outpaced the books. A Trek show that stops at 5 seasons can maintain a high standard of production, performance, and writing, especially since Paramount Plus has a full slate of other Trek projects to keep fans engaged. In other words, less can be more. A tight, 5-season Strange New Worlds could be remembered as a near-perfect gem instead of a once-sparkling show that faded into mediocrity. 5. A real finale gives fans emotional closure. One of the great benefits of a known endpoint is the ability to craft a satisfying finale. Star Trek finales have been a mixed bag over the decades. All good things. The TNG finale is rightly celebrated as one of the best series enders of all time. But Voyager's endgame felt rushed, and Enterprise's These Are the Voyages is widely derided. With years of notice, the Strange New Worlds writers can plan a multi-episode send-off that pays off long-running arcs and gives each character a poignant goodbye. They can build thematic resonance into the final season, echoing Pike's central question, how do you live when you know your future, and extend that to Spock, Una, Chapel, and the rest of the crew. Rather than a sudden cancellation or a shoehorned wrap-up, we could get something on par with All Good Things, or even better, given how serialized modern Trek can be. That's a rare gift for any fandom. 6. It opens the door for new Star Trek stories. Finally, ending Strange New Worlds at the right time frees up creative and financial resources for the next chapter of Star Trek. Paramount Plus has been aggressive in expanding the Trek universe. Lower Decks, Prodigy, Discovery, which ends with Season 5, and Section 31 are all part of a broad ecosystem. With Strange New Worlds wrapping up, producers can shift attention to fresh concepts, perhaps a series set after Picard's Season 3, a show about Starfleet Academy, or something entirely new. This mirrors the original 1990s handoff strategy, where the end of one series seeded another. In fact, by concluding Pike's saga definitively, Paramount may whet fans' appetites for an eventual Captain Kirk series or a miniseries bridging the gap between S&W and TOS. In short, endings create beginnings. The only way Star Trek stays vibrant is by letting go of even its most successful formulas and taking bold risks, just as it did when it greenlit Strange New Worlds in the first place. 7. Thematic symmetry, acceptance, and legacy. There's also something poetically appropriate about Strange New Worlds having a finite run. The entire series is about Captain Pike's acceptance of his fate and his determination to live fully despite it. A show that lingered indefinitely would undercut that theme, but a show that embraces its own mortality, ending on its own terms, mirrors its protagonist's journey. This could give the finale a metatextual weight rare in franchise TV. Imagine Pike delivering a speech about legacy and impermanence in the last episode, a moment that simultaneously concludes his character arc and speaks to the show's decision to exit gracefully. That's the kind of storytelling that turns a great show into a timeless one. 8. Quality over quantity. Ultimately, Star Trek fans have seen what happens when quantity overrides quality. We've endured uneven seasons, recycled plots, and finales that felt like afterthoughts. Strange New Worlds has been a breath of fresh air precisely because it avoided those traps. Its blend of adventure, humor, and heartfelt character work has rekindled the optimism of classic Trek while updating it for the 21st century.